So what have we got today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on 24 hours of carnage in Downing Street, not even that many actually, after 2 cabinet ministers and half a dozen minor members of the government all resigned in the wake of Boris Johnson's unravelling denials about how much he knew of sex pest allegations directed at his former Deputy Chief Whip, Chris Pincher. This morning, it looks like Pincher was reported to the police twice and Boris was told about him 5 times before completely forgetting all of it and appointing him to a role in which victims of sex pests would have to bring him their complaints. So Kevin, take us through this. Who's gone? Who's left? Who's actually running the country these days?
Yeah, who's running the country? Probably nobody's running the country. You could almost argue Boris Johnson hasn't been for months. But to lose your Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, your Health Secretary, Sajid, Javid, 2 of your most senior ministers resigning from the cabinet because they both have just had enough of the line. Yes, of course, they've got personal leadership ambitions, but nevertheless, both cited the lack of competence in number 10. Sajid Javid said he hoped that when Johnson survived the no confidence vote, he'd show some humility in a fresh direction. He didn't. While Rishi Sunak, said, and he was quite right, that the country can expect that the government's conducted it properly, competently, and seriously, and it isn't. There's also economic differences there. So they're the 2 biggies who've gone. There's a number of junior ministers gone. The aviation minister's gone. The general's gone. Some of the very loyal backbenchers have gone. And it really does feel like the end game for Boris Johnson. And what's the straw that's broken the camel's back is Chris Pincher and lying about the appointment of a guy with an unenviable record. And the lies have just caught up with him finally.
Well, Jerry says he's on the slippery slope, but hang on now. Boris Johnson lied about his girlfriend having abortions when he was a shadow minister. He lied about to every one of his members of his family and his wives. He's lied about Partygate. He lied about Owen Paterson. He lied about COVID care homes. He lied. Liar. Why is this lie?
Yeah.
Why is this one the one that's broken the camel's back? You'd have thought the COVID lies.
Yeah, and he lied about Brexit. We lied about 40 new hospitals. As you say, there are lies and lies and lies. I think it's cumulative, rather like the boy who cried wolf. Finally, the wolf turned up and devoured him. And I think with Conservative backbenchers, it's Chris Pincher, who was the Deputy Chief Whip. Outside of Westminster, it might be one of those roles. Does it really matter? It does, because you give them great authority over other MPs in terms of nights off, officers. You've got a problem, you go to the Deputy Chief Whip. They keep mental black books about indiscretions to blackmail you. And he essentially gave the job to a prowly predator, and they've revolted over that. As some people will say, isn't it amazing? He's the first prime minister in history to have broken the law in office when he was fined for COVID parties. Why didn't he go then? Why did they keep sticking with him? Keir Starmer has made the point that Sunak and Javid shouldn't be seen as heroes because they were cheerleaders for him. And there's a sense at the moment now, I think, with some Tories, they're rats leaving the sinking ship. They can see their captain, their skipper, who they were quite happy to ignore all the lies when they thought he was a success. Now they see him as an electoral liability after those big by-election defeats in Tiverton and Honiton, in the Blue Wall, Wakefield up in the Red Wall. They're worried about their own jobs, their own futures. That's what it's really about, those MPs. But they've just had enough. And I do think it's the end. I think the greased pig, as David Cameron called him, is finally on the spit.
What a horrible thought. Now, Zoe has said Boris has to go. Jamie says Boris has to do the honourable thing, not just for the Conservative Party, but for the country as well. Now, in losing, everyone who's commenting so far this morning is quite negative about Boris. Do you think he ought to stay? Anybody? Do you think that he's doing a sound job? Kevin may think he wants to stay because it might suit Labour, perhaps.
Yeah, well, if I was Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrats, Nicola Sturgeon, the SNP, I'd be launching the Save Boris campaign because he is a wonderful electoral asset for them. And the Conservative Party can't move on as long as he is there. They'll just continue sinking. They might try and perform the old trick, get a fresh face, and then say, you want to change? We've given you change. Call an election last year to try and wrong foot the opposition. is he? But he's not only incompetent, he's not only a liar, he's kind of lazy, he's unreliable, you just can't trust him at all. YouGov last night found a record 69%, that's 7 in 10 voters, think he should resign, including 54%, more than half of Tory voters at the last election. He will superglue himself to Downing Street. But I think the game is up. I think backbenchers are going to rise up and kick him out.
Now, Alan says he will still be Prime Minister because Starmer's not fit. We've yet to hear, of course, about the Beergate fine from Durham Police. They seem to have no sense of drama, or they would have done it last night. But we have to wait and see if that is going to come or not, and whether or not therefore Starmer has to resign. Now, in losing Sunak and Javid, Boris has lost the bankers. And in Morrison, he's lost one of his lawyers, the Solicitor General. He's now being propped up by Nadeem Zahawi, who's a former boss of YouGov, which, as Kevin just pointed out, reported the majority of just about everybody now wants Boris to go. I suppose there is a positive here, which isn't going to get very much attention at all, because, you know, a brown man and a former refugee is Chancellor of the Exchequer, which is an amazing sight in and of itself, considering the last sort of few decades.
You know, the Conservative Party, given it's got a wing that's racist, and I know Labour had its problems with anti-Semitism in the Corbyn era, I'm not denying that. But the last 3 chancellors have all been Britons of colour: Sajid Javid, Rishi Sunak, and Nadeem Zawari. And Nadeem Zawari, in some ways, is a great success story. He came to Britain as a primary school kid from Iraq. In the Saddam era, couldn't speak English. He's been very successful business-wise, although I think his tax records and reputation will be combed over minutely now. Big questions
about having a stable economy ever, because of the money that he spent, taxpayers' money he spent having his stables heated. So we'll have to.
Yeah, well, he did. He claimed on his expenses and had to repay for heating his family stables on parliamentary expenses. Well, at the time, the hated bedroom tax was being introduced for social tenants who were deemed to have spare rooms. So I remember Zawari's expenses were dubbed the spare groom tax.
Oh,
so all that will come back. All that will come back at him. And his record at education. Look, he's not been there that long. But the Tories have reduced spending per pupil on schools that 93% of our kids go to. They have an awful record. All he seems to want to do is pick fights with teachers and spark culture wars.
Yeah, so we'll have to wait and see how that goes. But I suppose apart from that thing, I mean, Ken says there the ship is sinking. Heather says the trouble is we've not got anybody else. Labour went against the people on Brexit, so who do you trust? Starmer has said that he's not going to go against Brexit anymore, but obviously people like Heather may not be convinced by that. But last night, Kevin, it was reported that Zahawi was going to be health secretary and instead demanded the Treasury. And he said, if you don't make me Chancellor of the Exchequer, I'm going to walk out of your government too, and that really will hurt. Therefore, he's a bit of a wheeler dealer, Zahawi. He got this amazing job. So how long do we think he's going to be Chancellor for? Because I suppose that depends how long Boris can be Prime Minister for. And in a normal world, he'd be gone by the weekend, wouldn't he?
Yeah, we don't live in a normal world. I mean, in Westminster at the moment, the Houses of Parliament and the Mirror's office at the centre of the place, and I assure you it ain't normal here. He's denying Zawari that he threatened to resign if he wasn't made Chancellor, because Johnson wanted to make Liz Truss the Foreign Secretary. I'm not sure I believe Zawari on this at all. He's going to be a very short-lived Chancellor, whether it's weeks or months, but it may not do him any harm if he's got his eye on the top prize of becoming Prime Minister, because John Major was a very brief Chancellor during Thatcher's period, and he got the prize, he got the keys to number 10. I think Zawari will come in and he will try and distance himself from Sunak, who put up taxes, by announcing tax cuts, so he can position himself in the Conservative Party for the Conservative electorate, because the next Prime Minister of this country, Johnson goes, will be picked basically by Tory MPs getting 2 candidates, and then the Tory members, which are so few, only a couple of thousand, they're like a weird sect, will then decide who it is. And he can point to Zawari, one, that I've been cutting taxes. And two, I backed Brexit back in 2016, unlike, say, Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, who's a more recent convert for her own good. So he becomes Chancellor. He's realised, I think, it's a bit of an investment of his time, and it will improve his prospects of becoming Prime Minister. That's why.
But then again, is he going to get to doing a budget in the autumn? Because we've got Tory conference in October. We've got the Standards and Privileges Committee reporting back perhaps in September on whether Boris Johnson misled Parliament. You've got the summer recess before that of heavy plotting. So we'll have to just wait and see how long Boris can dig in and hold on for.
Foxy, most Tory MPs don't think Johnson will survive much into the autumn. So the change could be before the Tory conference. They could have a very quick election. They don't have to take 3 months. And we used to hear the old excuse trotted out of, you can't have a new prime minister now because of Ukraine, which was nonsense in the sense that we changed prime ministers once in the First World War and twice in the Second World War, because of course Churchill was turfed out by the voters and Clement Attlee elected before the war was over. They were still fighting with Japan. So Ukraine won't save him, although I do kind of expect a phone call with Zelensky today for him to try and show his business as usual. There has been a sweet coincidence with those calls. And,
but as someone remarked on Twitter last night, we're going to need a bigger Zelensky, because it's not going to cover up this kind of stuff. Now, keep asking us your questions. Sorry, I just completely missed the one that was on the bottom there, just been taken away. But we keep asking us your questions. Let us know if you think Boris can stay in, or whether he's going to have to go. What do you think is going to happen? Now, Rachel says, we don't really have anyone to run this country. It's a scary world we live in. I think it was Belgium went 18 months without a government and they managed absolutely fine. But of course, it's different to not having a government to having a government that's run by who's running it at the moment. So,
yeah, Northern Ireland doesn't have a devolved assembly and the power sharing at the moment in the disunited kingdom. I think really what we need, and we should have had, I think, this after COVID, because the old 2019 manifesto has gone completely out the window. The Conservatives, Brenda from Bristol, close our ears, look away now. But I think we do need a general election so we can give the country, we the people, can give politicians fresh instructions where we want to go. Yeah, you want to go to the right with the Conservatives, left with Labour, down the middle with the Lib Dems, back the SNP, Plaid, Green, whatever. Northern Ireland, the Rainbow Coalition of parties. It doesn't matter, but I think we do. I think as a country just need an election, because everything was thrown up first of all by COVID. Now it's Johnson's behaviour. You chuck in Ukraine, a cost of living crisis that's going to really squeeze and bite. It's just started. Next year, according to the OECD group of 20 plus major economies, Britain's going to have more economic growth. Only sanctioned Russia is going to do worse than Britain. And this is really going to pinch people.
Now, Mike says, is Zahawi's talk today of tax cuts and large pay rises a sign of Johnson trying to survive day to day, or is he salting the earth for a successor with popular and expensive policies? Boris Johnson's very good at having popular and expensive policies, isn't he, Kevin? And he does like to sort of say stuff. And I think part of the problem that he's got is that he's bleeding this support from the Tory grassroots, from the activists, from the Conservative Association chairman and so on, from the people who knock on doors during elections, because they just feel that this has not been a particularly conservative government in the way that they expected to. They've had very high tax take. They've had very high spending. It's not the kind of thing they want. And they want a return to conservative principles. And so is this him trying to say, that's what we're going to do?
Yeah, but you got some of those conservative principles in the low paid and people on benefits and pensioners being squeezed when they had increases way below inflation. You can see what's happening to public spending across many services away from the health service. I would argue that's all very conservative. But he's a man of contradictions, Johnson. But he likes the great big flourish and sort of speaks in. He's sort of paint and great colours, but when you look at what's happened in the country, it is pretty conservative. I mean, I know they complain, and quite rightly, that taxes now, the tax take 36%, highest since the late 1940s, just after the Second World War. Squeeze on living standards is going to be the worst since the 1950s. Economic growth has been terrible, in part because of Brexit, which was, by and large, a right-wing conservative policy. 2/3 of Tory voters backed it, 2/3 of Labour voters opposed it. It's squeezed the economy. It's been disastrous. COVID, you look at the impact of that, which was massive, not just in terms of lives lost and people who are still suffering, but economically it was huge. Sunak deserved credit for the furlough scheme, but then you look what happened on PPE and the crony contracts and the VIP lanes and the corruption around that, the abandonment of the elderly in care homes who were sacrificed. The record is pretty grim. They always talk about the vaccine project, and somehow that's was made possible via Brexit. It was all during the interim period, the running through. We could have quite easily done that as members of the European Union. In fact, we were still part of the single market and the customs union at the time. It's just kind of another Brexit lie on that. So, the Conservatives made a pact with the devil when they picked him as leader, and now they're saying, "Oof, we don't like him." He was always like this. He was always going to self-destruct. He was always going to be a liar. He was always going to be incompetent. He was always going to be untrustworthy and deceitful and lazy. It's just Boris Johnson.
Yeah, it's kind of, you can't be surprised, really, quite, that what you get. If it is exactly what it says on the side of the tin, I think Boris Johnson can arguably come out and say, "You voted for me. You knew what I was like. You can't have a problem with it now." But who knows? Now, Paul said...
He was there. It was obvious, but people swallowed it.
Paul says, Boris can't lie his way out of this. He and his new Chancellor are going to buy their way out of it. We'll have to see, won't we? We are expecting more resignations today, probably more junior ministers or these parliamentary private secretaries who aren't in the aren't in the cabinet, but they are part of the government. They're sort of advisors, unpaid advisors for ministers. But Boris last week said he wasn't going to fundamentally change his psychology. While he has been forced to resign from a number of other jobs, in fact, most of the jobs he's had, that was because in each case he had a boss who could tell him he had to go. Now he is the boss. There is literally nobody, apart from perhaps the Queen, who can say, "This is about time, I think, for you to go." And I think when someone suggested to him about resigning, his attitude, I think it was reported in the Times today, was F that. But the Times has called for him to go. The Sun says he's on his final warning. Even the Mail has gone lukewarm. And the Mirror, of course, has been saying his time's up just for ages. I said he'd lost the next election over Partygate. Is he ever going to resign, Kevin? And if not, what is the possible process for him to actually go?
No, he'll never resign. The only way he can be forced out before a general election is for a majority of Conservative MPs to vote they have no confidence in him, and then he'll be gone. He won the last vote. It was held too early. I think it was 211, 148, was it? 41% of MPs voted against him, 59% for him. But about a third, just over a third of those who were for him were people he was given jobs, salaries, cars, red boxes to, or they were hoping to get jobs. A lot of them are having buyer's remorse now, and I think he knows that there is another no confidence vote. He will lose that. I'd bet your house on that. I'm so certain. I'd bet everything you own, Foxy, he would lose that no confidence vote. So
you're betting what I own, and I don't know.
It's a safe,
the World Bank owns my house.
Yeah. But he knows he would lose. He knows he would, and he would lose.
Mello says he's on his way out. Patricia says, "I think it's time the Queen made him resign." I just wonder, Kevin, whether even if the Tory party votes, if they change the rules and they manage to have a vote of no confidence, and they win that, and they say, "We have no confidence in you," he is then removed as leader of the Conservative Party against his will. But the Queen has invited him to be Prime Minister and to form a government. If he can still form a government, then he can stay Prime Minister, can't he?
Yeah. Could he do a Trump? Could he have the mob march on the Capitol?
Well, I can see a mob marching, but not for him.
No,
the other way around.
I don't know. There must be enough odd people who would try and serve him. But the position with the Queen, and there's a constitutional monarchy. I, like you, a Republican. Anyway, but we have a constitutional monarchy, and the Queen summons to the palace to make Prime Minister the person, the MP, who can command a majority in the House of Commons. If he lost his majority in the House of Commons, should he try to cling on? The Tory MPs say you got to go, and he says no, I'm not going. I'm going to try and cling on. There'd have to be a no confidence vote here. Now,
well, then, I suppose what
yeah,
they could do then is say Starmer and Davy or someone else. If other parties in the House of Commons could say, well, look, we can form a coalition and then call a general election straight away, then the Queen could then summon Starmer and say, you form a government, let's crack on.
Yeah.
And we'd all go, yay, thanks, Queenie.
Yeah, we get into sort of weird, uncharted, sort of American style areas like this. But I suppose the reason why we can talk it isn't completely far-fetched is because Johnson's all about Johnson. His priority is 1, 2, 3, Boris Johnson, Boris Johnson, Boris Johnson. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. But maybe if the Queen does do that, you'd stop being a Republican, Kevin.
Yeah, well, there's well, only for a day. But there's no love lost. There's no love lost between the Queen and him, I would suspect, after he advised unlawfully prorogue Parliament. And then we know Prince Charles.
All the royals hate him. All the royals. We know that Harry snubbed Boris Johnson in the lineup as well. They all seem to really quite dislike the man. So I have to see what happens.